Hello, and welcome back to the Strength of G podcast. I am here today with a special guest, Julie. I thought before we jump in, I'll give a quick intro to who Julie is for those of you that don't know. So, Julie is a movement and breathwork coach. She currently lives in the US. Originally from England, Julie is also an independent filmmaker, artist, photographer, academic, and writer of the book Breaking the Jump 2016. She has also written a Ph.D. on parkour. And Julie started parkour in her 30s in London and produced one of my favourite ever videos on YouTube, which is Movement of Three. If you haven't watched it, I highly recommend. Julie, it's great to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to come on.
My pleasure. And we just had a very quick catch up before we started, and you're not in the US, so that needs
No.
updating.
Yeah, so I left, so I was based in Southern California for the last kind of 7 years, and in the middle of March, I packed up my things. I don't have many things, I'm kind of minimalist, but I packed up my things and my most treasured possession, my dog Pax, who's 12 years old, and we've moved to Greece. So I'm having a whole new Mediterranean chapter of life. So yeah, all change, and it's kind of nicer to be home as well, like closer to home, closer to family. And yeah, let's see what happens next.
Yeah, so cool, so cool. And yeah, I personally love the Mediterranean, so the idea of living right by the sea sounds very, very nice.
I'm loving it. I'm, it's so far, it's felt like the biggest upgrade of my life I could ever do. As someone who
Nice.
loves
Were you by the
sunshine.
sea before?
Yeah, yeah,
Were
yeah.
you
So
by the sea?
even I mean, I grew up in Plymouth, so I'm in the UK and
Oh yeah.
in Devon. So I'm a kind of water countryside girl, really, and so I love it. It's kind of like I'm really drawn to the water. So even though people know me for parkour and things with that, it was almost kind of like parkour was the thing that actually kept me in London because it was kind of my way to play.
Mhm.
Whereas normally all of my favorite training ground, it's the sea. It's just to be in water. So to discover these other ways of moving that were like, well, I'm not living in the countryside. I'm not living next to the sea. Like, how do I do this thing? How do I stay happy? How do I stay sane? How do I stay creative in my movement? So
Mm.
yeah, I've been really lucky to I've been lucky, but I've also been very intentional about knowing I thrive and feel really good when I live close to and spend time in the sea. So I was like,
Mm.
right, I'm gonna move to the Med. Let's see.
Yeah. Nice. Nice. That's really interesting. That's really interesting to hear about that journey. And actually, yeah, the first question I wanted to ask, which actually also someone on Instagram asked as well, so they'll be happy to hear this question included, was what does your training look like now?
So my training now is a really mixed bag, and it depends where I am. So my kind of parkour training is it's just rail play. It's really kind of opportunistic training. Like if like I watch your reels on Instagram and stuff, and like I'm not going out doing loads of precision jumps and stuff like that. I'm in a very happy generalist kind of phase of life and movement. So I do a lot of ground flow. I mean, I was introduced to a lot of quadrupedal movement, lots of QM, lots of crawling drills, through parkour, Yamakasi style training and conditioning. And I mean, it used to kill me. It used to be just like I'm crying and dying. Like, when will this stop? Why do you need to kill me for an hour and then try to ask me to do technical things? Like, I'm just done. Um, but then at the same time, it kind of changed me, and it did give me the kind of body armor that I needed. And but then when I was in the States, I had the opportunity to learn the animal flow system, and that kind of like took like crawling and just kind of went, oh, but we can do all these other things as well, and you don't need to go from A to B. You can just have this like 2 meter square or 1.5 meter square, and you can do all this stuff, and it's not yoga, and it's not this thing, and it's really 360, and so I really embraced that and loved that. And then And then just, I'm kind of a pirate. Like anything I see, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. It's like, oh, BJJ, hip mobility drills on the ground. I'm like, oh, I love that. Yeah, great. Yeah, take a bit of that, take a bit of that, take a bit of that. So um, my basics are like I walk a lot, and walking sounds like when you're in your 20s and 30s and you're training, you're like walking doesn't count. But when you're in your 50s and you're like, yeah, I walk like 8 miles a day. Like, yeah, you're moving. Like the nearest supermarket here is a 20-minute walk each way up and down hills. So, it's like I've got a 4 kilogram bag of dog food in my backpack and some
Yeah.
things. And like, whoop, whoop, whoop. So there's kind of movement every day in my life, just doing everyday things. But my training is, yeah, a lot of ground flow. Because I've just moved and don't have anything with me. It's still in a very kind of, I don't really know. Like at the moment, I'm swimming twice a day, like probably 45 minutes. When I was in the States in a more kind of routine life, I was doing also a lot of kettlebells, and loved that. Loved it. I also had a set of gymnastics rings. Loved that as well. Um, there's, and like as I'm listening to this, I'm like, yeah, there's not a lot of structure. It's very, but there's always balancing, always groundwork. I'm always up for like, if I see some nice railings to like
Yeah.
just do some balancing, some vaults, some little bits.
But
And I
there's kind
think
of there's like themes, so they change, based on where you are and what equipment you have. But there's kind of the theme is like body weight training, making it work
yep,
with what you've got.
yep,
Swimming at sea because it's there. That's sort of your
yeah.
cardio.
I mean, like, why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't I swim in the sea every day? And like, the sand is also really nice. There's a lot of kind of like really like, belly on the ground, like crawling drills that are like it's just horrible to do on any terrain other than amazingly soft grass or
Mm,
sand. So
yeah.
I'm just open to kind of like, oh, that's there. Like, okay, let's do that. But then also like if I've been in hanging out with my friend who has a boat, and like so when we're in marinas, sometimes like I'll walk early morning and then like there's some really nice stairs and little walls, and I'm like, oh yeah, no, I'll do some jumps and do some little wall runs. I like to always kind of like just like say hello to stuff. Like even there was a set of railings where I used to live, and I used to drive past them and I'd be like, oh, I need to go back and say hello. Like I'm always kind of checking in also of like, can I still do that? Can I still do
Yeah.
that? Am I scared to
Yeah.
do that? I haven't done that for a while because parkour was always I don't know how it is for you, but it's always a very humbling process to me. And and I remember even, like the outdoor London training sessions where, like on the way there on the tube, my stomach would be a little bit like, so I'd be like, I just don't know what's going to be asked of me. I don't know what's going to be thrown at me, and I don't know how I can show up. I never take it for granted. Or there's very few things that I take for granted. And I think that's something that Stefan Vigru really emphasized that. And it's something I took to heart was really just like, don't say you can do it unless you can really do it. You can do it cold
Mm,
start. You can do it on your worst day. Like otherwise, just like shut up. Just shut up. Like, so people who are like, yeah, I can do this. It's like, do it now. Oh, no, no, but I'm not warmed up. It's like, well, shut up then. You can't do it. So it's a very,
yeah, yeah.
I'm always just like, let's see. I don't know. I don't know how my body is
And
today. I don't
what
know how my
really
mind is today.
Yeah, yeah. No, and what really comes from what you I was listening and from what you were saying is freedom, like freedom of movement. How you were like listing all these
Yeah.
different things you do from the rings to the kettlebells to swimming in the sea to carrying your shopping bag. Like really what's, probably for a lot of people listening could also be quite like, whoa, I wish I could do all those things. It's freedom and like you said, you've built your body armor, you've built a body that's strong and now you can play with it and that's amazing and that's something to strive for, something to aim for everyone and everyone can achieve it and it is kind of I think those initial years are important and building up your body armor is important, but the objective could be to just be able to move freely and be able to go and play on a railing
Yeah,
or go and try a jump you used to do and that's really special.
definitely. I mean, I think the having the freedom of movement to not be limited. So for example, the other evening, my friend and I went for a hike, and there wasn't really a road. We were just like aiming for this building, like this old kind of stone building on the top of a hill. We're like, oh, let's see if we can get there. And so it ended up being, kind of scrambling over some rocks and some stones in those sections where it was like, oh, and there's all these kind of dry stone walls here. And it was like, well, and I was thinking like, well, am I going to climb over the wall, or am I going to kind of quadruped along the wall, or am I going to balance along the wall? But at no point was I limited to how am I going to get over the wall, and how am I going to carry on my little adventure or my mission for the evening of how are we going to get to the top of the hill, and then how are we going to get down the hill? Am I going to have to jump down from there? And I have the techniques, which is really nice. So, but it's more that I can do things without having to have this limitation of, well, and also at the same time, I'm someone who's really happy to ask for help all the time. If I'm doing something, like, excuse me, can you help me get down from there, or can you help me do this, or can you help me do that? So there isn't a kind of ego, but I'm definitely, my movement practice is driven by, I'm just a freedom freak. I don't want the limitations. I want the freedom to be able to move in ways I want to move, to be able to continue to do the things I love doing. I don't want to, like, I don't think about standing on one foot and putting my shoe on. I don't think about, oh, if I go swimming and there's a platform, how can I get out of the water? Can I get out of the water? I don't think about that. I'm not limited by that. So I think those are the big, like, oh, there isn't a supermarket nearby. Like, my dog eats a lot of food. Like, we go, go through a lot of dog food. So it's like, well, okay, I can walk there. So those things are, the original kind of, these parkour sayings of like, we'll just find a way. It's like, that got really, it's like, it's under my skin, it's embedded. It's just there. Like, can you find a way? Over, under, through, like scrappy, messy, my legs got scratched to hell, like going on this hike. But it's like, yeah, like we went over stone walls and we did this and we found a way. And it's those kind of things that, I remember like, being out with friends in London in the evening, and I don't know, you're in a park and then you realize like, oh shit, they've closed the gates. Like, we're here after dark. Like, how can I get out? And you're like, I can climb down from that really high wall. And it's just like, that feels good.
Yeah.
But I don't know whether it's just like the kind of forever rebel or a little bit mischievous, but really just the freedom thing. I'm a freedom freak, for sure.
Yeah.
I don't like the limits of those things.
Yeah, no, and it is special. And, as a personal trainer, we talk about these things increasingly with clients because we become more and more stuck to a chair and slowly take the shape of the chair. And so having freedom of movement is really special. It should be the norm, but it's something to strive for. It's something to work on. That can be the goal. It doesn't always have to be like, I want to be able to do a pull up or a muscle up. It could just be, I want freedom of movement to be able to play with my kids and stand up afterwards and not
Yeah.
feel all sore. And
Yeah.
there's a question I wanted to ask you, and I don't know if it's, I don't know if it's really specific or hard to answer, because it's kind of from before your time, from before my time. But I just wondered if maybe in the conversations you had when writing the book, it had come up. I never heard about women in the beginning, and maybe there weren't any, and that's just that they were a group of guys, a group of friends, and that's fine. That's pretty normal. It's not like they were excluded. It's just they were a group of guy friends. But I just was curious if there was ever any mention of women in Lease in the beginning, maybe like a cousin that was like, oh, I want to come in on the trainings, and maybe then it was too tough, or I don't know. But I just thought I'd ask because you'd had all those chats when writing the book.
Yeah, so there were. So in the Bell family, so not David's side of the family, but Chow and Williams and Fung, their older brother as well. Chow talked about how their aunts would kind of train with them as well. They would move, and then also Katty, their younger sister, she would train and move. And I mean, Katty was one of I think probably the first woman who I ever saw, and I was kind of like, fuck, I've never seen a woman step up and be brave like that in parkour. It was just like, wow. And there was a jump in London in, where was it? It was near Abbey Road, and it's I don't know if you know, it's like a big stone circle, and I don't know if it's a well or stairs or something, but there's a really big drop, or there's a lot of height there. And I remember Forrest and Steph must have been there. We're doing like precision jumps, so jumping from one side to the other side, and like it's a fair distance, and like I said, there's this gap. And I remember some of the people who were there were kind of like, looking at it and sizing it up, and Kathy just like she just like went over to the edge and was like, she was like, okay. And, did her little ritual, like so many people have their ritual of whether it's like, they wipe their shoes, or Shirley would like walk away and come back 3 times, or like everyone, they have their own little idiosyncrasies of things. And she, she kind of just did her little thing and like, whew, and did the jump. And it was like, okay, I've never seen that before. That was really cool, really impressive. And even seeing how, at that time, seeing, another female body doing these like really long rail walks at height and just being like solid in their mental game as well. Like there were so many people who were physically very impressive. Like I saw so many people over the years who, came from dance or gymnastics or from boxing or from the military or like all these different kind of physical practices. And it was always interesting to see who had both the physical and the mental game. And there were so many gymnasts who couldn't do the fear game outside. Like concrete versus padded floor was like, no. Dancers were terrified of getting injured. But yet like their movement library was, and their physical capacity was like, are you joking? Like someone who kind of didn't have that, like such a physical side, I was always like, really? Like, come on. And then you realize like, oh, like all of these pieces have to come together. So Kathy very sadly passed away maybe 10 years ago now. There was an accident, a very tragic accident. But she really, changed, I think, for a lot of the women who were around at the time. But yeah, in the Belle family, there were women. And then also, even though Williams was very young, he was training a group of friends, and, their girlfriends would be there, and they would train them really, really hard. Like, it wasn't a kind of like, oh, no, but it was like, if you're here, you show up. So, they were never, it was never the spotlight. They were never kind of celebrated. And, there were a group of guys who were all friends and connected in their own way. And it was their story that got, told and shown and led to other things. But, I mean, there weren't very many women. Like, we're talking like 2 or 3. But there were female bodies doing some of these moves and some of these kinds of training. Yeah, for sure.
Great. Isn't it just really nice to hear? Because, I was thinking about it the other day and I was like, at some point there must have been someone who asked, to train. So
Yeah.
it's good to know and to hear that. So thanks for sharing, and I'm really glad to hear. It's really nice to hear and to kind of relate to it. Like it isn't too dissimilar to now, and a lot of the girls I train with, some did come from their partner training and now they train. Some of them now train more than their partner, But so sometimes, it is like a male who then introduces you to parkour, but then it becomes your movement practice. And there are always less women than men, but there are lots of women training, which is great. And we want to promote that and encourage that if women do want to try. So it's interesting to hear about the beginning. And what was the beginning like for you? So I said, I hope I got it right. I think you started in your 30s. You started filming initially, or sort of, I think that was your first approach, and then eventually training. So how did it happen? How did parkour come into your life? And what did
Yeah.
the training look
So I was 34 when I first kind of officially started my kind of parkour project, PhD. And I didn't know what it was going to be. I'd been doing I'd done basically a documentary film project with a really good friend of mine. And it was all about, it was actually based in Southern California, and it was about people who search out and then skateboard in round bottom swimming pools. We made a film called Chlorine. And so there was this thing of, people using things in ways it wasn't designed for, and also, appreciating some of the more kind of banal left behind, residues of the built environment and using them physically, imaginatively. And then I was back in the UK and I was doing a lot of visual anthropology evening classes at SOAS in London, and it just set my brain on fire. I was just like, I want more of this. I want more like this whole anthropological filmmaking feedback loop of like, you film stuff, you become part of the community, and then you show the images to the people you filmed, and then of like how you were representing them, and then they kind of they would come back. So like when I first started filming parkour, I thought, I was filming it I was filming it as a filmmaker would, not as someone who does parkour who has any physical empathy for the act of that landing or that jump or that move. And so one of the first things that people would say was, they were like, yeah, but you didn't spend long enough on the landing. Because it was like, it was always spectacular. And that's the thing that people see, is like this body moving through the air, these kind of, Tarzan, Spider-Man images, it's beautiful. It's to see these things. It's stunning. But then really what the person cares about, or what another athlete would care about, would be like, well, what's the quality of the landing? Like
like?
how did it
Yeah,
finish? And
yeah,
I'd almost
yeah.
kind of like stopped filming. I was like, oh, it's done. And so that was like the first thing that was very humbling, because you're kind of like, I've got all these years of filmmaking. I've won awards for my films, and like some kids telling me I don't know how to film this thing, and then you're like, yeah, I don't know how to film it because I don't do this thing and I don't understand this thing. So I started filming, and then and the thing is, when you're around people who move a lot, it makes you want to move. But I think by the time I was, yeah, I mean, I remember like in September 34, well, I was 34, and it was at IMAX, and it was the first day of meeting like some of the members of like Urban Free Flow at the time. And it was all kind of like really uncomfortable and really weird. And then I remember, then Paul Joseph, or Blue as he was known as, arrived. And then when he moved, it was like, okay, now I get it. Okay. Because he was just in flow. Like his athleticism, his skill was just another level. And then Johnny Budden was there. He was like really young. I think he was like 16 or 17 at the time, or like Sticky as he was known. And then Andy Day was there, the photographer. And then we started talking about like creative stuff. And I was like talking about the anthropology stuff, and like, oh, he's into French philosophy as well. And I have all these representative, this kind of like geeky, filmy photography, urban studies type stuff. And so that started then. And so I carried on just filming them for like, 3, 4 months. And people, they would say, like, oh, come on, Julie, have a go. And I'd be like, no, like, no way. And inside I was kind of like, oh, I'd like to. And then, but you're just kind of too shy to try. And also you have some kind of kudos as a filmmaker at the time, or I did, because some of them really loved some of the skateboarders that I'd worked with. So it was kind of like, wow, you got to work with Lance Mountain, like, oh, these people, blah blah blah. So you kind of like, you don't want to give up any tiny ounce of credibility that you have, and by just like falling on your ass and just being like, oh, I'm scared, I'm crying, oh, that hurt, and go limping home kind of thing. And then one day I remember I was filming something, and I stood on this wall, and I had to just kind of get to another position. And I could either like step down, put the camera down, pick the camera up, step up, pick up the camera. And I remember I just kind of like looked around, and then I just kind of like stepped and kind of jumped across. like hoping no one would see me. It was just my little way of finding a solution that day. And I remember one of them were like, "Oh, Julie's doing parkour," and I was just like, "No." It was just like really cringy. But then shortly after that, and the thing is, there were no classes. There was no inroad for an out of shape 35-year-old filmmaker to go, how do I start parkour? It was a group of guys who were like average age, I think 18, 19, who were doing it in their time, in their way. That was a thing. So like like where was the accessibility for me? And also, I didn't trust them. What did they know? They knew how to train for them. They were maybe natural athletes or maybe, predisposed to those movements. They had a background in, martial arts or doing this or that. How do you work with me? I didn't trust them, but I trusted one of them. I trusted Forrest because he had a background as he was a professional athlete. He was a personal trainer. He was closer to my age. I was still like older than everyone. But I had trust in him. He had a knowledge base that I could show up. And so he actually, through Urban Free Flow, Easy at the time, set up these indoor classes, like on the east side. I remember it took like an hour and a half to drive there at the time. It was like, it was pure dedication, even to get there, to find the place. And I remember the first class, and I wasn't the only woman. This was amazing. So Karen Palmer, I made a short film about Karen called The Inside Out. So Karen's the same age as me, and this was amazing. She had a creative industries background. She worked for her parents ran a big record label. So she was doing all their music videos and stuff like that. So we had this like creative film background and thing. We were the same age. But the big difference was I'd stopped doing sports at 16. Karen carried on. So Karen came to parkour like hungry for it. Like she was like, yeah, I do squash and I do like I don't know football and this and that and da, da, da. Like she was strong, she was ready, and she was like game on. And I was kind of like, that's really scary. Like I can't jump up there, And so it was really nice to have another female body in this like crazy early days, and also to have someone who was really good to like see these possibilities. And yeah, the indoor classes were just like, it's like so many parkour people have the experience of like, how do you feel after your first training session? You're just like, well, I couldn't walk for 5 days. Like sitting down and getting up from the toilet was really difficult. And then every time I laughed, like my abs would hurt. Like your whole body's just in shock of like, what was that? And I think Forrest even kind of said afterwards, like, I think maybe I took it a bit heavy on you guys. Like, it was full on like military style conditioning with some like play and balance beam and some, creative stuff. And when you're in the moment, it's kind of okay. But then afterwards, you're just like, I haven't done anything like that for a long time. But then what was incredible was like within 3 weeks, you can do a similar level. And yeah, you're tired and you're stiff, but you're not debilitated in the set. You're not kind of paralyzed in the way that you are that first time. The first time is just like whole body shock.
Yeah, you get used to it quickly.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing how the body adapted. And so yeah, there were indoor classes and then there were outdoor classes, and a lot of the times there were maybe 6, 7, 8 of us, and then more women came, like people like Amy. I don't know if you know Amy Lara, and like Amy had this background, like, and Amy's like strong as hell. I think she was like the first woman I ever saw with like a proper like 6-pack. It was like, you are so strong. And she would turn up and like she was working in fashion at the time, so she would turn up talking about like some Alexander McQueen fashion show and this and that, and then she'd, oh okay, and then she'd go and do this like incredible high long traverse where you're just like, oh my god, is that even possible? And so I I was around some, and then Auntie, like when Auntie came, and that was the classic example, Auntie Murray, the example of, a friend of hers, Yao Gogoli, they were doing I think they were doing taekwondo together, and they came to it was like a Sunday, it wasn't XXL, it was just like a Sunday meetup kind of thing. And I remember, Yao saying to Auntie, like, okay, so there's this rail here, and what you need to do is, so you come up to it and you just put your hands there, and then you kind of like just bring your legs through. So it was kind of, like a Kong vault on a rail. And Auntie was just like, oh, okay, so you want me to that, well, okay, yeah, well, kind of like this. And she just did it. And I remember like Karen had been there like working at it, and I'd just been like, well, no, I'm not, that's not available to me yet, And she just flew. And then so it's like, huh? And I was like, have you done parkour before? And she was like, no, I'm just here with my friend just to try some things. Like, no, just casual. But again, like, so, and then like, Tracy Tiltman, first class, she came and she was doing like single leg pistols on the beam. She was like, oh, you want us to go down on one? Oh, and then I come up like this. And it was like, yeah, that's how you do it.
It's so true though. It's so true. And I guess it's like they're athletic, that these people were athletic already. And it's like there
Yeah,
is, if you have always
yeah, they had a
been,
base, they had a foundation.
yeah, accumulated skills, mobility, strength from other disciplines.
Yeah,
And sometimes when you come
yeah.
to parkour, that really helps. Um, but it's interesting. There's something really interesting about, I had it as one of my questions here as well. Yeah, it was this like, why do you think, and if you agree with this, that parkour attracts a lot of beginners? Because you do see a lot of people like yourself who come to it, and actually I did as well, with no background. We've done some sport. It's not that we never have, but we're not the Karen,
Yeah,
and I see it again and again even today, in my current coaching and training. And I wonder, yeah, what do you think about that?
I think it's I think there's several factors. I think there's the imagination. I think there's a secret little ninja in many of us who a lot of activities that are very regulated and standardized that don't speak to us. A lot of team sports don't speak to a lot of people because, maybe you were that person at school who, you never got picked for the netball team or the sports team, and you're still mentally scarred, like you're just standing there going like, nobody wants me, And so this is something that it looks fun and cool, and there's an adventure, and there is a little kind of rebellious thing. Like, it's not gymnastics. You don't have to like point your toes and like end like, well, yeah. You can wiggle in and out of railings. You can look at a wall and be like, I want to go up that wall. I don't know if it's ever possible, but if I can imagine myself going up that wall, what else can I imagine? So I think, we've all seen Jackie Chan movies and things like that, and you're just like, that's cool. And sometimes, like with some of my clients, like there's women in their 50s and 60s, and they'll say to like, and I'm thinking like, okay, they want to do some, like ground flow and look at some like foundational fitness things, and they're like, I want to go on Ninja Warrior, and you're like, okay, cool, yeah, why not? Yeah, let's do it. So I think there's sometimes it brings a side out of people that they haven't had an inroad or a way in or an outlet for this kind of moving under, over, through. It speaks to the quiet adventurer who maybe hasn't been adventuring for a while. It speaks to freedom. It speaks to movement that isn't sport. It speaks to a creativity that's physical and emotional. So when you look at it from those, like through that kind of level of transformation, it's like, of course, you'd have loads of beginners, because there are the people who are, already active, already sporty, whether it's someone who's like a gymnast and a dancer, but then they also like climbing, so it's like a natural like, oh, now we're out, and they like nature, so like, oh, you're like outside, and like, okay, so it's a kind of a natural progression in their physical evolution. But then this, like, so for me, like the bigger physical side of it is actually the least interesting part of parkour. I find, like, if someone says, like, how big is your jump? I'm like, you're so boring. Like, that is the most boring, uninteresting thing. Like, when did that become a thing? So, to me personally, so uninteresting. And, but for someone to go like, oh, you can reimagine everything around you every time you walk outside your door, and you can reimagine your relationship with it, how you connect with it, what you get to see and learn about yourself every single day. Like, okay, let's go there. Let's go down that rabbit hole. That is a whole set of adventures that has longevity. It has accessibility. It has scalability. Whereas let's go do big stuff, it's very reductive. It's a very reductionist. It's a part of it for some people. And maybe, someone listening could go, well, that's only because you're not very good at it and you can't do big jumps. I'd be like, well, yeah, maybe, but I don't have that. That's not my drive. Parkour is so multifaceted that you can have all those sides. So I think the appeal to beginner is the appeal of change, the appeal of adventure, the appeal of imagination, and the appeal of a type of freedom in movement that a lot of sports don't have. It's like some academics call it these kind of like freedom lifestyle sports. As whether it's like whether you surf or windsurf or climb and things like that, then that would also be more akin to a kind of parkour freedom-based practice.
Yeah, and actually it's interesting. I mean, so many thoughts, but I guess one part is like not being measured, and because we don't have a strict structure of how you measure, what level you're at in parkour, and that's quite freeing for a beginner, that you're not immediately like, oh, but are you playing matches? And it's like, well, that doesn't really come up in parkour. And also it's instead measuring it, you can measure it on how you feel. And so that's for you to measure, it's like, for example, like when I describe parkour, because there's many definitions. It depends what kind of parkour you're doing. Parkour has so many people practicing it in so many different ways, and I love that. But a description I like is, to me, it's like dancing on walls, because you're kind of
That's
designing
nice.
choreography. Like, it's kind of there's a rhythm to it. And actually, often I'll go out and not just me, many people will go out and train, and they'll repeat the same thing like 35 times or more until it's just right. And often just right is also how it feels. From the outside, you might be like, you've done it already. You're like, why are you still going? But it didn't feel right. And that's kind of, at the end of the day, you're doing it for you. Because you're like, I want to sit down in 10 minutes and be like, yeah, that felt really good. And whilst all that's happening, you're also getting incredibly strong, incredibly mobile, and you're improving your cardiovascular fitness. But like, all those things are just happening. It's not really like what I'm thinking. I'm not thinking about that, but naturally it is happening. And that's really cool.
I mean, parkour people, I was just gonna say, I mean, the way that I mean, I think any kind of way that people, I've seen people train parkour, like if you have consistency in your parkour training, you can get really silly strong. Like, parkour people are really relatively very, very, very strong. And it's impressive, it'll stand you. I mean, there were so many times when quite a few performers and dancers would come to classes in London, and they would be training parkour so that they could go on tour and not get injured when they were performing on tour. And they would always say the same, people would always say the same thing, like, I've never been this fit and strong in my entire life. I've never been this fit and strong. And lots of, personal trainers would come and they'd be like, wow, no one's ever trained me like this before. Like this is not your standard sets and reps. Like, what's going on here? Like, this is different. So
Yeah.
it's scalable. It's scalable. You don't have to go out and, like I'm into, I'm 55. I just want movement for life. I'm not training for an event or a race or a medal or anything. I want my movement available to me. I want my fitness available to me. I want to be able to say yes to things. I want to be pain free and keep all of that and enjoy it. Um,
Yeah, and another thing I was thinking while you were talking was like, yes, like there is definitely, a culture in parkour of chasing the biggest jump and that's fine. Like I think do what you want and it's really impressive sometimes to watch when it's done well. But I think I'm safe in saying like there's only so long it can last, and so at some point you'll you'll need something else. And if you really love parkour, you'll find something else. If parkour isn't just a big jump to you, if it means more than that and it does more than that for you, then it will happen organically. You will start to seek other ways of moving. And often, people experience it when they get injured, whether minor or major injuries. But you then are like, either I sit down for the next 6 months, but lose all my strength, or I find other ways of moving. And actually, the reality is, parkour is very addictive in a good way. So most people they want to come out, they want to keep training, and so then and sometimes from that, really cool things come from it, and people's movement styles change. And yeah, I think often in the beginning it's like big jump, but then as either you have little injuries or you see someone move and you're like, oh, I've never seen someone move like that, and then you sort of start to explore that there's so much more than just a big jump.
yeah, I mean, when I was interviewing lots of people, I found there was a kind of common theme that would happen after like 7 or 8 years of training. So at the beginning, and especially when people are, gaining a lot, so they're, like, wow, I couldn't do this, and now I can do this, now I can do this, now I can do this, and it's, I think it's normal when you want to explore your limits, and if things are going well, why would you stop exploring your limits? It's an incredibly rewarding, satisfying, fulfilling endeavor to really know like what you're capable of. But after this like 7, 8 years, and I don't know if it's the same now, but what I noticed was people would say like their motivation for training it wasn't so that they could get stronger. It was so that they could manage their emotions better when they were in the act of doing different things. Because, they know how to get stronger. Like you know how to build muscle, you know how to improve your tendons, you know how to do that. Most people, I would say, are lacking knowledge on recovery. They know how to train, but they don't know what to do in between. They don't know about active recovery, about nutrition. I mean, I saw so many incredible athletes like with the worst nutrition in the world. And you're thinking like, yeah, you're gonna you'll get away with it for now, but at some point you won't. And then also if you're talking to someone who's injured, and you go, well, how's your nutrition at the moment? And they're like, oh, it's pretty shit. And you go, well, if you kind of give your body shit ingredients, don't expect there to be a really amazing repair job. It's like, it's so there's kind of, some knowledge gaps, but um, the the continued motivation. So if you speak to someone like Williams and say, why do you keep training? I asked him, and I think he'd been training for like 20 years at the time. And he was said, it's so I can control my emotions. You're still getting to see who you are in the moment of when faced with this challenge, how do I respond? It's not about the size of the challenge. It's about the whole holistic thing that is that challenge. Do I mentally go towards it? Do I give myself some like, oh yeah, but you're tired. It's okay. You don't have to do it today. You're like all the inner dialogue, or do you draw on these years of experience of going, well, where's my self-knowledge? Am I genuinely tired, or am I scared tired? I just haven't been brave for a while, so I'm out of practice. Like I never forget being in at Latimer Road training one day, and It was maybe one of the a women only training session, and I remember there were some cat leaps and standing on the wall, and the lady next to me, it was like one of her first classes, and she just said, no one's asked me to be brave for a really long time, and now I'm having to be brave, and it just feels very, very new. And it was like, you just summed so much up in that one very honest reflection of how you feel right now. Because if life is challenging or stressful, we seek comfort, we seek convenience, we seek all of those things. And yet parkour invites us to go, hey, go seek challenge. In your
Yeah.
really stressful life, what are you going to do in your free time? You're going to go out and you're going to find challenges, and you're going to see what that does for you and what that brings into your life. So yeah, I think that it changes from you explore your physical limits, and then there's a kind of natural evolution to your mindset within
Yeah.
that game. And then there's a bigger picture of just of self-knowledge of like, so like, is today the day to break the jump? Or is it like, no, I'm not ready? Or is it like, I'm physically ready, I'm just scared? Or I'm this, but I'm that. It's all self-knowledge, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess the longer you train, the more you have new thoughts like, well, I have done this before. I used to do this. Now, can I still do it? Am I just out of practice? Have I lost strength? Am I not capable of doing it?
Mm,
And you have to kind of get to know yourself and know like, I have done this before,
yeah.
but where am I at now? And really assess like my physical strength, my mental strength, how I'm feeling today. And like you say, yeah, you can be tired, and sometimes you can be tired and do the jump anyway. And other times you
Yes.
need to respect that you're
Yep.
tired, and it's knowing the difference.
Yep.
And only you can really know. It's very hard to advise someone else on whether they should do the jump or not. Um, and
Yep.
sometimes you might feel the urge to protect them, but actually the best outcome is you knowing if it's the right time to do the jump or not.
Yeah. And I think that's where, like, having friends who are coaches and who really know you, who can kind of like cut through your bullshit for you and just be like, stop your bullshit, you've got it. Like you've got it. Like, yeah, you're scared, but so what? You've
Yeah.
got it. And it's like, so my thing was always, I used to get bored of the version of me that was too scared to do it when I knew that
Mm,
I was physically capable, but I was just scared. And then I would just get so bored of that inner dialogue. And I had ridiculous friends who I loved dearly, like people like Thomas Quiddick, who would be like, you can do it, so I'm just going to stay here until you do it. Like, I'll stay here in this park all night. And I'd just be like, you're so annoying. You're amazing, but you're so annoying because I know you will. And even if I go home, you're going to stay in this park, and that's going to eat at my mind because I was just too scared to do the thing that we both know I'm capable of doing.
yeah.
It was
Yeah.
like, those were my kind of crazy parkour days.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned at the start something about you were talking and you said, that when the training was really grueling and you were like, I'm dying and why am I here? What am I doing? Yeah, tell us a bit about that. Was that London training? Was that with the Yamak? Or maybe both, but yeah, what were you thinking of?
So yeah, that was London training, and it was the early days of parkour coaching, which then became Parkour Generations. So this was with a lot of the kind of second generation guys. So with Stefan Vigru, Johan Vigru, Kazuma, then Thomas Quiddick, and then Forrest was there, Dan Edwards was there. And I mean, it was tough. It was like, the warm up would be 20, 30, 10. Sometimes it would be like a 10-minute run. And at the time, I really hated running. And I would just like stop and tie my shoelace like every 2 minutes. And Johan Vigru would just be like, the shoelaces again, Julie. And I'd be like, yeah, again. And it would be like, by the time I'd like run to a spot, I'd just be like, I can't do anything now. I'm like my ankles hurt. I'm like, I'm through, Um, but there would be, sometimes just like 30 minutes of quadrupedy, just up and down, up and down, up and down. And then And then there would be different routes of, sometimes it would be like a, traversing a route, or sometimes it would be like, like here's a route, like you know, A to B, and find a way. That was the thing, just find a way. But the only rules were no knees. You just couldn't put your knees down on concrete, but you could climb over things, you could step vault things. Some people would fly over things. Other people, like one of my other parkour heroes is Katie Stanford. Like, she came, and she's like the bravest parkour woman I've ever seen. And when Katie came, when she started, she was very overweight. And I think even loads of the coaches, we all agreed, like, we've never seen anyone with so much commitment and just go for it as Katie. Like, Katie's a legend, you know? So, there would be people like me, people like Katie, there would be Layla Curtis, who was an artist. We even have these memories of, like, doing an outdoor class at Latimer Road, and I think there was me, there was Layla, and loads of just really capable people. And at one point we were doing quadrupeding, and someone like crawled over the top of her. It was just like, and then there would be a challenge of like, okay, and then like walk along this rail, and then when you get to the end, but like Layla and I couldn't get to the end because every time you went off, you had to go back and start at the beginning, and like we were never going to get to the end. It was like there was so much hilarity, so much kind of, and people were still very generous with us, always patient, never judgmental, comical, and just there was a real respect for you're here and you showed up. Like, okay, yeah, you can. These people over there are doing like 50 drop jumps from height, and what am I doing? I'm doing something very different over here. Yeah. And so it was always welcoming. It was always, I would go and I would be invited to go and train with people like Yao and Auntie and Thomas, like these people who are like a very elite level athlete. Mm-hmm. And I'd be like, they'd be like, oh yeah, just come along. And I'd be like, are you sure? And they'd be like, yeah. And like we'd get to a spot, and I'd, at the beginning I'd be like, well, I don't know what to do, and they would find me something to do. And then we'd all do a bit of it together, and then they'd go and work on their thing and my thing. And so this was something that I was really forever grateful for, that it showed me that I had a place. Mm-hmm. Like my body, my mindset, my age, my otherness of whatever, of the minority there, was like, I have just as much right to be there. And I can train alongside people who are operating at a very, very different level than me. So I really like this kind of interskill training approach, because it's all effort. Like, what scares me is going to be different than what's scary for them. But my fear is as genuine as their fear. And we respect it. Like, things don't come easy for them, and they know that things don't come easy for me. So that was really nice. So but no, the training at the time was, a lot of conditioning. But then sometimes there would just be like long mental challenges. Like, we're just going to go and we found these rails, and like, you just got to stay on the rail. You just got to stay on the rail. And you like, sometimes they were like, this is crazy. And sometimes you'd actually end training and be like, God, I actually think I feel okay. And then other times, like by the time you've trained and then you've gone home on the tube, and then you're like, oh God, now I've got to walk to the house. You're like, and there's a fatigue that was just really hard. But there was always joy. It was always joyful. It was always adventurous. It was always encouraging. It was always motivating. It was okay to experience whatever emotions you wanted to experience or were experiencing during those sessions. Like, people would have emotional breakdowns all the time. And I remember, some people would be like, oh, I can't believe I cried. It's like, God, people cry all the time in parkour. It's fine. So that was happening just all the time, because
Yeah.
you were invited to just explore your own challenges of like, well, I can vault this thing when I approach it from this side, but don't ask me to do it from the left. When you ask me to do it from the left, it paralyzes me and I just want to burst into tears.
Yeah.
And it would be like, okay, well, let's just hang out on the left side for a bit, like, okay. So yeah, that was mainly the kind of second generation guys. And then there was always loads of really interesting training in Denmark as well, at Gallo, or Galev as it's written, the school there. So I was lucky to be invited there, and that was always like crazy, like 5 days of training. Like, but then you're always, you're training hard during the day, and you can also just step in and step out. And I think for me as well, because like I'm very polite and I seem really nice, but I have no problem saying no to anything and just walking away. You can't oblige me to conform and do something I don't want to do. So anytime I was in a parkour class, I was always like, this isn't boot camp. I'm not signing up for the military. If I don't want to do it, I don't do it. They can deal with it. Like, I'm not. So I was never afraid or too shy to just kind of go like, no, I'm not doing that. And I did that loads of times. Like, people go, like, they go, okay, do this and that, and I just go, no, that's a no, that's a no, that's a no. And then they go, okay, well then try this. And I remember one time at Latimer Road, Stefan Vigru came up with a route, and I was just like, no, I'm not doing that. And he was like, okay, well, what about this? And I was like, no, still a no. And like he scaled it down and down and down, and I was still like, no. And then he was like, well, Julie, it's up to you whether you can choose. You can walk, or why are you here? And I was like, fair comment. Yeah, I can do that last one. Yeah, all right. Yeah, that's true. So I think, I'm a very good self-advocate, but then also someone needs to kind of call you out and go like, hey, come on, you can take a baby step. Because there's always a baby step. There's always something that you can do to kind of say hello to a challenge or a move or an obstacle, and see how it goes.
Yeah, it's interesting. And as beginners, it's also important, like, for those people that really struggle in the beginning, it's okay to do the baby step and just to, because the baby
Yeah,
steps, before you know it, even within 3 weeks, become, before you know it, someone shows up and goes, you're doing that. And you're like, oh,
yeah,
is it good? But people can be very self-conscious. I've taught like beginner women's classes, and it's actually really tough because you have a big group and some, like you say, fly over the things, and then the others go, why
mm-hmm,
can't I do that? And they really watch each other,
mm-hmm,
and you're like constantly there trying to like involve everyone and make everyone help
yeah,
everyone to appreciate what they can do and show them the next step for them. And often it happens, and I don't know, I think it's just a thing in the beginning sometimes, and that you kind of watch too much what other people are doing, and
mm-hmm,
instead of focusing on what you're doing, and it can be
yeah.
quite
And it
tempting.
and it's got, yeah, and I think because I was with people who were so in a different league than me, like I knew
Hmm.
that what they were doing, it was completely irrelevant to me.
Yeah.
So like I rarely watched parkour videos. I still very rarely watch parkour videos because it's like, well, it's not really relevant to my practice. I never
Hmm.
really watched guys doing parkour because it's like, I'm sorry, but like I'm selfish. This is my time. This is my physical empathy of like I. So for me, like when I saw people like Auntie Murray move, and when Fizz Hood started coaching, and it was interesting as well because like she would get us to do things that male coaches were kind of scared to ask all the women to do. Like
Hmm.
so, like our warm up with Fizz had to be quadrupedy, but backwards on a really high narrow wall. Fizz was just like,
Hmm.
come on. And because there's this woman asking me to do it, I'm like, okay. But when it was someone like Blaine or, this, very accomplished male athlete, there was always this like, yeah, but it's okay for you.
Yeah.
But you give me this
Yeah.
tiny woman who's like, yeah, and I'm like, okay, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Um, so yeah, I think other people's parkour, you have to realize it's irrelevant. It's
Yeah.
completely irrelevant to you. because
Yeah.
you're the only one who can move your body, your jump, your story, your emotions, your fears. But sometimes you find someone who's just above your level, and they're the only ones you should kind of like keep an eye on,
Yeah.
because then it's within your realm of possibility. But my like the realm of possibility of the people I was surrounded by was like like
Yeah.
just such a comical distance.
Yeah. And in some ways that works really well because then like there's no comparison. It's like, oh, just hanging
No?
around them I feel like is good for me. So let me just spend a bit of time here and then every win, it's like when you train on your own as well. It's like I find solo sessions, every win you like really celebrate it because there's no one next to you doing it easily or it's like, oh, oh, okay, I
It's your
progressed and
victory. Yeah.
yeah, it's your victory. And I guess for
Yeah.
you, it's kind of similar. And when you train with people that are that much better, yeah, like you say, there's no comparison. And so your victory is just your victory. And you feel like you're progressing and that they're rubbing off on you. And that's exciting. So it worked well in that sense. But, you know, you can't control what situation you're going to be in when you start parkour. And yeah, I think you're
Sure.
right. You've got to try not to compare because if you want to be here and if you want to last and keep training parkour, then just focus on your journey. And actually, there's probably someone in the corner watching you going like, oh, she's really good. Or even if you don't feel it or even, you know, just that the more you train it, the better you get. And there will be your parkour will become something that you can be proud of, but you've got to get through the initial training. You've got to get started, otherwise, you know, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
There was a
just
question.
showing up is the
Oh,
hardest thing.
yeah.
Oh, go on, go on.
No, there was a question someone asked, which I'm going to read as it is, and you can sort of interpret it as you want. It's about David Belle, and it says, first to you, it says, first, thanks for the book. And then second, does anyone ever have a talk with David Belle recently? Or has anyone spoken with David Belle recently?
I have no idea.
Yeah,
Is my answer
I
to
thought
that.
so.
I have no
Yeah,
idea. I don't know what he's doing. I don't know. I have no idea.
yeah. Did you
Yeah.
interview him for the book? I can't remember.
Yeah, so it was I kind of interviewed him, but I didn't interview him. Like I was there, so I don't speak fluent French. And my friend Thomas Kudik, he was good friends with David and close with David, so he set up the interview. And it was funny though, because he said at the time, like, okay, David said yes, and we're going to go to France and we're going to do it, but you know, at the last minute, we may knock on his door and he may just decide not to do it. And I was like, yeah, that's fine, no worries. So we went to France and I had all the questions, and Thomas really like understood my research and what I was doing and all the questions. So we went to David's house and we hung out and then stayed there the night, and Thomas did the interview. Like I was sat in the room and I recorded it, and Thomas asked my questions to David and they did it in French. And then Thomas translated the transcript as well. So that was how me interviewing David with
Yeah,
Thomas as the translator there. Yeah.
makes sense. It makes sense. Makes sense. And he was still training at the time, I'm guessing, yes.
Sorry, it disconnected. Say again.
And he was still training at the time, David Bell.
Can, Not really. He was already started. I mean, I don't know, but he'd already started doing films, doing more films then. So, um, and it was funny, like nearly every time I went to Lee's, anytime I was with Auntie and we would go to Every, David was always playing basketball. They'd be like, David Bell's in Every play basketball again. So, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah.
Yeah.
Funny. Anyway, one person out of many who are very interesting from the beginning of parkour, and yeah, it's really nice to interview and chat about these things because I love the idea of them kind of being immortalized in this video and in many others, but not that many others, and it's nice to have because you know these stories are really interesting, and there were some people at the beginning that were really inspiring that are now harder to find harder to chat to, um, and it's just back in the day it was only a handful of people training. Now there's thousands of people doing it, and it's evolved as it should, and it has changed. And there's people doing ADD, there's people doing free running, there's people doing parkour, and it's kind of all the same thing, but everyone has their own interpretation of it and their own preferences. But in the beginning there wasn't many people training, and it's good to know the stories, and there's a lot of good stories from that time.
Yeah, and I think it's just, I mean, I think it's really weird for someone when someone else writes a book about you. I think it's just a weird, like I would find it really weird if someone wrote something about me and my friends that was like our thing, and so I respect that side of it as well. Um, and then the thing is, parkour's had such an incredibly accelerated growth, whereas other things like skateboarding had, they had print magazines, which so the dissemination of information and pictures and stories and things all happened at kind of a snail's pace. But parkour happened like at lightning speed because of the internet and then phone cameras and YouTube and stuff like that. So it just I think it was and maybe still is kind of challenging for some of the original people to kind of look at where things are at, or know what their kind of place is, or maybe what they're doing. And they're just, people are just doing their lives and having their own practice as well. And also, not everyone is ready to share their story just at the time, just because other people want to hear it. It doesn't mean that like all the stories have been told. So
Yeah. Yeah, and it's nice to see some connections happening as well, as they would naturally. But I was in Milan a few weeks ago, and in a classic Milan park, and bumped into Laurent, which was amazing because I hadn't seen him since
nice.
8 years. So it was we were at a spot. It makes sense that he was there, but still, it was nice to just bump into him and have a brief chat. And he's doing well, and we had been training as a group of London people with Thomas M.P.O, who's a very high level French guy, kind of, very young, very good, really pushing the limits of parkour. And Laurent was like, yeah, I wasn't thinking of going out today, but then I thought I said I'd come and say hello to Thomas. And I was kind of surprised because I was like, these are the two extreme opposites of like the new age of parkour and a Yamak, like
Mm-hmm.
someone who was the beginning. But it's nice, they don't have to publicize it,
It's
they don't have to
beautiful.
put it on social media.
Yeah,
It's just, and they both love parkour, and
yeah,
that's how I think it should be. Like I'm very much the idea of we're all doing the same thing, and we can practice it in different ways. And I am interested and want to be interested in what other people are doing. Doesn't mean I have to adopt it and that's the only way, but I want to share and see what other people are doing. I enjoy watching parkour as much and training, probably training more, but I enjoy seeing what other people are doing. And it's cool to see how many different versions of parkour there can be.
yeah. I mean, everyone's moving. It's movement, and it's kind of a sign of growth that there would be all these factions as well. But at the end of the day, if we all kind of zoom out, it's like people are moving, and
Yeah.
and some people are, the things that people are doing, like it's extraordinary. Like it's changing the reference of what we know is humanly possible, and um,
Yeah.
it's amazing. But it's a movement practice. People are moving, and I think, like for me, it would be normal that someone like Laurent would kind of do that because they would respect. They would look at someone doing something extraordinary and know like they'd have to have trained hard to get to
Yeah.
that. And and it's always hard for the kind of first or second generation because they're they're paving the way, and then there's always this then like big leap, and then
Hmm.
there's another little plateau, and then there's another leap, and then just when you think things are good, and then it's like where's it going, like what's and
Yeah.
it's like I don't know, but it's a lived culture, it's a lived movement culture, so it will be shifting, and there'll be trends, and it'll be like, oh, it's really cool right now, and then like, no, everyone's kind of bored of parkour. Like it's, it just gets. I hear it get mentioned in like TV shows just casually. Like I was watching something a while ago, and they said like, oh, how did they break out? What did they like parkour their way there or something? And it was kind of like,
Yeah,
so a
yeah,
script writer somewhere is into parkour and just like drop that in
yeah.
there. And I remember even years ago watching an episode of Modern Family, and the young guy said like, no, we lost our drone. Yeah, we were out making a parkour video, and it was like, hang on a minute, did that just get like 10 years, like 5 years ago, 6 years ago? This was still like a really small group of people,
Yeah,
and now
yeah,
it's just thrown into conversation on this like, hit TV series. Was like, okay, it's out there, it's changing, it's evolving. There'll be growth, there'll be trends, there'll be ups and downs, there'll be interest, it'll kind of wane, and then there'll be the big names, and then all the ones who are forgotten but played a really important role, and it's all movement, which is
yeah,
I think it's a beautiful practice. I think it has a lot to offer for so many people at different times and stages, and yeah, I mean, I'm very grateful for what it's given me in my life in terms of the mindset, and as well as the physical practice, but just I think just the mindset of overcoming obstacles and knowing yourself, and it's a very emotional physical practice, and I think that's a really interesting side of it. And yeah, and it can just be fun as well. It can just be this, like this hidden little adventure story, and it's nice to go outside and see something, and even if you don't do it, just be like, oh yeah, you could like go over there and down there and da 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 da, or you can imagine someone else like, oh, those underbars, so and so would, yeah, they would love that
yeah.
move, or like this place here, or like I was training just before I left the States. There was a women's parkour gathering in San Diego like the week before I was flying. So I only went for one day because I was like, I'm in a really big busy stress period of life right now, but I went for one day. So I trained in Mel Two Toes was there, and like so she's a really great example of someone who's kind of shown, Mel's just turned 50, and like the way that she moves and all her rail flow. And so I showed her like this little spot near the park where I was like, I think you'll really like these rails. So we just went, the two of us, and trained for half an hour on these rails. And like she went straight to this corner part, and I was like, I never go to the corner bit when I'm coming here, but because she likes these certain types of moves, so I was like, oh, okay, all right, let's do that, and let's do that. So yeah, just having these ideas and
Yeah.
imagination, and how if you can reimagine fix things in your environment, then you can reimagine your relationship with that environment. You can reimagine your abilities in the environment,
Mm. Yeah.
and do it, and share those experiences, and then also have this very functional side of things of like, can you get over, under, through something if you needed to? Can you get over that wall? Can you scurry underneath the thing? Can you balance if there's a flood and you need to step over stuff? Like 3 times where I used to live, I had to break into my one of my neighbor's apartments because he was always locking himself. He had a head injury. He was always locking himself out, and he would come and knock on my door and go, Julie, I think this is your kind of thing. Could you climb from the top of my truck, like from my truck up to the railing, get into the thing, go over the thing, and then open the doors and come? And I'd be like, yeah, Fred, no problem. Yeah. So I would go on this little mission, and like, you know, and so I'm
Yeah.
I'm grateful for parkour.
Julie, we're gonna have to wrap it up there, but thank you so much for coming on this podcast. I think, yeah, it was
Pleasure,
really
pleasure.
great to chat to you, and I think it will be a really good listen for a lot of people. So thank you. I thought I could ask you at the end, sort of, where can people find you? Where should they go?
So I have a website, julieangel.com, and on there, if people are interested in some of the ways I train, there's a kind of free like movement snacks guide they can get. I run like once or twice a month. I do some kind of free training because people can work with me individually, one to one, but it's all online. Um, but you can kind of get a taste of those things. And so if you can sign up for my newsletter and all that standard stuff. And I'm on Instagram. I have a really stupid name, which is Julie_Angel_Ph.D_ movement snacks, like short and catchy. So yeah, but you can find me on Instagram, on my website. And yeah, if anyone's curious, just come and say hello and see the kind of stuff I'm doing and playing. And everyone is generally far stronger and more capable than they realize. So, and you can find ways to move that bring you more joy and more energy, especially as you age. So that's just the message I try to spread these days.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much. We will wrap it up there. And yeah, if you enjoyed listening to this podcast or watching it on YouTube, please do give it a like, give me a follow or subscribe to my channel. And let me know in the comments if you have any other questions for Julie or questions about parkour, drop them in the comments below. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.